Welcome into the Loochador Podcast, brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. David Nuño and Billy Liucci, and it's back to school. And my kids, Billy, went to Academy, and they got their shoes, they got their backpacks on. And, you know, I'm a big hunter now, so I'm going to get my hunting gear from Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Now that you're
hunting Nuño.
Rambo over here.
Commando.
What's the guy's name? John Rambo.
Yeah, First Blood.
In case you take off and you'll be able to hide from everyone. But now that I like.
It's great material, isn't it?
Yeah.
But like I could hide.
But you're going to have to buy a lot of stuff at Academy. It's like you started with the shirt. Now you're going to have to buy the rest of what goes with that, which I believe you're going to have to go buy quite a bit of hunting equipment. I'm sure a lot of people I'm sure a lot of people right now are buying. I don't think you have to be in camo to fish.
That's a good point.
I don't think you're hiding from the fish necessarily.
No, but like, let's say I want to stay in the character and
fish. No, I think you'll be okay.
People who go hunting.
I think you can wear, you go buy bright colored fishing shirts from Academy.
Okay, you could do that.
Those Magellan, you could go buy some of those, I think, from Academy.
Okay.
I don't think you need camo to fish.
Shoes.
My big
hiking
crazy.
Boots, potentially. Running shoes.
I think I'm going to try to sneak off. I mean, God forbid, I might sneak off for three days to Jackson Hole. Sorry, guys. I will.
You'll be back.
I'll be riding from the Grand Tetons. Don't worry. But might sneak off, do that for 3 nights. If I do, I probably need to run by Academy before I go.
Hey, by the way, Academy, without the big prices, from backyard barbecues to Friday night football games, Academy's got everything you need for Texas-sized adventure. Stop by our local store and enjoy easy delivery or in-store pickup at academy.com. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there. They're Texas-born and bred.
Just all for those keeping score, that's like days 4, 5, and 6 of vacation this offseason.
For the year.
I had someone, I mean, they were nice, but they DM'd me like, hey, as someone that runs a business, you shouldn't complain about lack of vacation. And I'm like, did I complain or did someone assault? They just made a comment about me taking a 3-day vacation. Or did I bring it up on my own?
I think you were assaulted. Verbally.
It was an assault.
Verbal assault with fingers on the so let's talk a little bit.
He's back, by the way.
Let's talk a little bit about how camp has gone. So like what's your feel for this team right now based on maybe where you were entering fall camp after spring, and now that we've got, 15, 16 practices in the books? How are you?
You're not yet to game prep, right?
Right.
Game week, as we like to call it. But I think I kind of asked specifically, like, what's kind of the problem? They have a couple more days of, like, what you would call camp, like a couple more days of more big picture, and then they'll go into full Notre Dame prep. They're off. Today's Monday. They're not practicing. They're not off, but they're not practicing. And then they'll resume a couple times this week, and then it's game week. I don't know. I'd have to check, but I'd be willing to bet they do some kind of game simulation type thing on the weekend and then move into game week. And they just finished up with their second scrimmage last night, which, if you listen – I'm not going to go just do straight scrimmage recap here, but you listen to this podcast, you're going to hear a lot, as you guys know, a lot about most positions, a lot about guys rising, guys making moves. There's going to be more info in this than you're going to get added up anywhere, and it's going to be the most accurate. And at the same time, I'm just telling you right now, there are a lot of battles ongoing. This is what I think people are going to have a hard time reconciling with in terms of, and it's up to you to look at it how you want, because a lot of people are going to go, oh no, that's not good. I think in some ways it is good. Like, they could trot out a starting 5 on the O-line and go with that the rest of the year. They could pick one linebacker to start alongside Torrey and York and feel pretty good about it. They could go with a set kind of 5-man rotation in that secondary, 4 starters and a nickel, and not really deviate from that and be pretty damn good. I don't think that's what's going to happen at all, actually. I don't think they're going to just be rolling O-linemen through or just trading out linebackers on every play. Like, you can almost, not every play, but you could almost do it running back and receiver. Sometimes you see, a lot of rotation on the D-line. We know we're going to see it on the D-line. you could be looking out there on defense, and there are times in practice we can look out there and see this. And you go, well, the first team offensive line, they're doing a better job. They're moving the ball on the ground. Well, normally on a lot of teams you're going to say, oh yeah, but that's against a collection of second and third teamers. Of course they're going to do that. Well, here's what a combination of second and third teamers. Here's what a combination could look like. You could go Rylan Kennedy, who is going to be, I think, an exceptional player at A&M. Like, he's a young guy that they're really excited about. And Joshua Salazar, who started, was it like 30 games at UCF, who's a respected program. On the inside, you could have Rodis Johnson, who started 25 games in the Big Ten at a solid Wisconsin program, like a mid to upper half of the Big Ten. And then you could have like Gabe Dindy, who's a 5-star. That could be on some days, that might be your third rung of the rotation. Some of those guys some days are with the twos. You know, Rodis floats around. Like he's kind of all over the place. He's going to play a lot. But my point is, you know how much talent that it's not just like, oh, Rylan Kennedy's going to be good and Dindy was a 5-star recruit. He's got a ton of talent. No, I'm also including, you could plug in Malik Silla in there,
right?
Who's a third-year guy that I think's had an excellent camp. You could plug in and say, okay, we're going to throw Regis or Hicks in here, who they're in a great battle right now for the starting job. I don't really think it matters because I think they're both going to play a ton. But one of those two, either a fourth-year guy that's played a ton of SEC football or a 5-star. I mean, so... And I think so. We think of it as simple on the D-line, but Elko and Bateman are going to be able to do that in the secondary. So, yes, who ends up starting is going to matter. But at the same time, I think you're going to see a lot of guys playing and not in a bad way. It's just in a way that we haven't been able to see from A&M in the past. And then when you look at linebacker, I'm telling you, one of the best battles of camp to me is these Scooby Williams, the Florida transfer, Solomon DeShields from Pitt, and Damian Sanford. It's like, pick your day that you go out there, and you're going to be impressed with one of them. It might be a different one each time. And DeShields, to me, is kind of the wild card because what is his trajectory as a guy who wasn't here in the spring? But I don't think it matters because I think when they play Notre Dame, you are going to see a decent amount of all three of those guys playing linebacker. And then they're going to have tape, and it's not a situation where they're going, man, we don't like any of these guys we got. And I've seen that happen before. We've all seen it. Got to figure out who can play. It's more of like, we know they can all play. Let's see who's the most effective early season because they've all we have no problem throwing any of them out there.
Can we play that same game with the offensive line? Because there's some battles going on there that you can plug and play as well.
To a degree, and I think they're trying to figure that out. And again, I've watched this O-line all camp. I am convinced they are going to be significantly better than what we've seen the last 2 years. I've specifically watched the style of coaching by Adam Cushing. I've watched them perform. I'm convinced they're going to be significantly better. What I don't know, because it is practice, and they're still kind of figuring out exactly what. For example, like, I'm making something up here. If Notre Dame is like super, super strong inside, and they're not as strong on the edge, and Florida, and I haven't studied Florida at all. Florida has got really good edge guys, and they're not very strong on the inside. I don't think that's a season-long thing, but I think in the early going, you can kind of
move around.
And even in game. And people, the first thought is, that's not good. I think it's. I mean, perfect would be, okay, we got 5 guys. We think they're all going to be all SEC either this year or, like, say, by the next year. You know, the 2012 offensive line. Okay, you got Pat Lewis and Jarvis Harrison and Ced and Jake and Luke. All right, yeah, we all want that. And that's where they're going to be trying to get. But what I see is they added a guy that's going to start in Armaj Reed Adams from Kansas, who's going to be an NFL offensive lineman. They added a guy in Coley who is pushing an incumbent year 3, Mark Naboo, for a job at center. They've got a returning starter in Naboo that could play center or guard. They've got a starter in Besantis that they think when paired, he's had a great camp. When paired with Reed Adams, those two could be just monsters on the inside, whether it's Coley or Naboo at center. Those two could be monsters. Naboo can move around. They've got an established left tackle in Trey Zune.
Mm-hmm.
You got a guy in Crownover who I think looked good this weekend. I thought he's had a good run of practices of late. You've got Fothery who started as a freshman and sophomore before battling injuries last year, right? They've got a lot of depth. And another guy that I haven't talked about who's really been doing this in camp of late is TJ Shanahan.
I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
And he's a dog. He's a tough guy. And I think they've got some tough guys. Reed Adams is a tough guy. Besantis, when he's not a true freshman trying to figure out a position he's never played, is a tough guy. Once you cannot, then you just play ball. And that's what he's. So I think that element of that O-line is going to be significantly upgraded. I think the physicality of the unit. I didn't mention Cam Dewberry, who was not in the spring. They've got a lot of depth. They don't have. They have options. I don't feel like there's a million different options that I think would work, but they've got options in terms of the ones we've talked about, which would be Reed Adams at tackle, at right tackle, and letting either Naboo at center and then Dewberry Shanahan battle it out at guard, or Coley at center with Shanahan, and then Naboo Dewberry. And there's different combinations of that, depending on who's performing where. Point is, they got a lot of nice depth inside. So there's that option, or it's the way they ended spring and started camp and still practice every day with this one too, which is Besantis, Reed Adams at guards, Zune, and then the battle between Crownover and Fothery at right tackle. So that thing will be interesting to kind of follow right on through fall camp. And when I say this, I mean it. I don't think it's a settled today. These are your 5 starters, and this is what we're going to ride with the whole time. And I don't think, like I said, there's the ideal to that. I'm really encouraged with the offensive line. I think if you talk to the Aggie defensive linemen, they would echo that sentiment. I just think they've got, you look up and out of nowhere, they've got some real depth. I didn't mention, a guy like Aki, who started
a lot of games. 8,
10, 12 games in his career. I bet it's at least 8. That's a guy that's gone and started on the road at Alabama in his career. I think he started at Jerry World and, in front of all those neutral fans. And then, so all of a sudden you look up and they've got quality depth on the offensive line. It's been a long time. I think it's been since 2020 when they had all those seniors and they had some young, since they've had that. I really like a couple of those freshman linemen. I think they hit in that group too. It's early, but I like going out there and watching. I've been impressed, and I've gotten good word on that freshman class of 4. You've got Ashton Funk, who occasionally is, you see him pop up on that second team. I think he's going to be really good, and he's so versatile, as we talked about during his recruitment. Blake Ivy has been impressive for a true freshman lineman. Papa Ofua might be your next guy out of the Pacific Northwest to make a big impact. You got 2 of them now in Naboo and Coley. And then you've got Robert Borden, who is a late addition from Duke. I find myself when I'm out at practice sometimes going, damn, who's number 70? Oh, it's great-looking young prospect. I think they did a good job with that class. The great news is they shouldn't have to play this year.
Right.
You never say never, but they shouldn't have to because of everything we just mentioned. So, yeah, That's where the O-line's at, and they're going to get a great first test in game one. I'm sure Notre Dame will see some different looks, but they're going to get a great first test in game one. I think Notre Dame is going to see different looks at a lot of positions because, again, this is that time of year where you see who can play, and you believe they all can play. If you didn't, then those are the guys that you don't put out there. Texas A&M has a lot of depth, even at positions that last year and the year before were a liability.
Yeah.
You know, you look at the O-line and the secondary, they were liabilities. I don't believe they're going to be liabilities this year based on what I've seen in camp. And the secondary, I believe, might actually be a strength when it's all said and done. You know, I think they'll play a lot of guys early. And then as the season goes on, you'll see that rotation tighten a little bit to top performers, not just against Notre Dame, but McNeese, probably Florida, and then maybe you'll see that start to tighten up when they, you know, one more game. It might be towards the end of September when they go into just basically nothing but SEC the rest of the way, where you'll see that a lot of those positions settle. But the reason they're able to, they're going to throw a lot of bodies at these early teams because they can. And they're good play. Like, look at the secondary right now. Like, I don't think Mike Elko-ish and Jordan Peterson are going to have any issue putting out. I mean, look at corner. Oh, yeah, well, let's go with Will Lee, B.J. Mays, Des Ricks, who's certainly looked the part. Even, you know, Javon Thomas has quietly had a good camp. And why not? He played last year. He got thrown in the fire, but he was a young guy they were really excited about signing and playing. You've got Saunders, if you want a big corner, who you got, you know, from Cal Poly. You've who am I leaving out? Bravion Rogers, who's been doing a lot at nickel. And you've got Jaden Hill, who's one of your primary nickel guys. And then you've got Tyreek Chappelle, who's going into year 4 as a starter. Chappelle has had a really good camp. I think he's shown a lot of toughness, you know, practicing through stuff where on other times in the past I don't know that he would have. I think his whole mindset, he's just grown up. You know, he's a senior now. Chappelle's probably, he could start at corner, he could start at nickel. And I think he's been a real find since Elko got here at nickel. Don't forget, when Mike Elko was here the first time, how important his nickel guys were. Mm-hmm. You know, who was it at the beginning there? Was it Capers Smith? Was that 1 year of Elko with Deshaun Capers Smith where he was a real effective guy? I'm trying to think if it was him or not. And then after that, it was Ronnie Elam. And he was so good in those first couple games. And then they ended up, I believe it was him, they ended up losing, right? I could, if I'm off on that, let me know. We'll edit it. But that nickel spot was such a big deal for Mike Elko. And then early on in Antonio Johnson's career, he was a game changer there. So the fact that Chappelle's getting a lot of work there tells you the trust level and kind of what level he's been performing at. So, and then Hill is familiar with that spot from his time at Florida. And I'm sure Bateman and Elko had a lot of conversations about that before they brought Jaden in. So that's secondary. And by the way, what I just talked about is corner.
Right.
Okay, and then you got safety, where Bryce Anderson's been as good as advertised, where a really nice addition has been Trey Jones from Central Michigan. Every time I'm out there, I look up, I kind of go, who's number 9? And I'm like, oh. I mean, he looks like he and Ratcliffe.
Ratcliffe, yeah.
Ratcliffe.
Marcus Ratcliffe.
I want to say Ratliff all the time. He and Ratcliffe look like linebackers playing safety. And then
Dalton.
Well, and then Jared Kerr is a player. But man, I'm telling you, the guy to kind of circle, he'll contribute this year. But a guy that I'm looking at and I'm going, oh, next year, this dude, later in his career, this dude is number 3, Ratcliffe. he is going to. He's so slim still and slender. He's got the frame where he's going to really fill out, and I think he's one of those pieces that like Elko and Bateman and Peterson can do a lot with, and probably some this year can do a lot with in terms of his versatility as being as big and rangy as he is. But when you look at his frame, I'm like, a year from now, this guy's going to be smooth 10 pounds heavier easily. And he's already pretty physical. I didn't mention Dalton Brooks. Dalton Brooks is one of my like guys that I think's been the most impressive. From last year, last time we saw him, he had an interception in the bowl game through spring ball where he was really impressive. But now in fall camp, and I know it's talked about, he had a pick six in one of the scrimmages, but he explodes to and through the football, explodes through the ball carrier. He looks and plays like a very smart defensive back there, but man, he's got just a nose and a feel for the football. And when you've got him and Bryce back there, I think there's just a great deal of range.
Yeah.
That I don't think Elko had anything like all of this to work with in his first stint. And he had some great, like Jalen Jones is going to probably start in the NFL in year 2. Antonio Johnson, he had Damani and Leon. But when you're just talking about all at the same time and the amount of depth, I think this will be the most he's had to work with in the secondary. Because even with those guys, that was over a 4-year stretch, spread out, mix and match, and there was always, I thought, pretty significant weaknesses. And certainly as the seasons played out, you would see that. And then it got kind of worse it got noticeably worse after he left. The irony is he walked into a little bit, some key pieces here. Bryce was here, Brooks was here,
yeah,
Javon, Bravion, and obviously Chappelle. A couple others I probably just skipped over that we've talked about. But then what they did with that in the portal, which was probably the most impressive portal work they did, was in secondary and linebacker. And you move in there, and it's like, okay,
we got something.
I think he's got a lot to work with back there, and I think you'll see a ton of dudes early on in the season against guys like Riley Leonard and Graham Mertz.
Got to ask you about wide receiver because that is one of the big question marks. What have you seen this camp?
I'm getting interested in, first and foremost, you've seen all the chatter and all the talk. Terry Butt, and they addressed it. Klein addressed it this week. He's getting looks on offense. He's a dynamic weapon in the return game and with the ball in his hands. And we all knew that. Elko knew that. They weren't going to make it through fall camp without giving him looks. And Colin Klein, I'm just telling you, he's so innovative. And it's not just in the passing game, it's running the football. I've talked to people that know about him as an in-game adjustment guy. We know what Elko does in that regard because we've all seen it.
We've seen that, yeah. But
Colin Klein comes in with that same reputation. The more I hear about that, the more interested and excited I get about a hire that I was already pretty fired up about. But as this thing goes on, just keep giving him weapons and keep giving him speed and really see what he can do. He's going to carve. I'm telling you right now, I would be surprised if he doesn't. I think he is the wild card that not nearly enough people are talking about this year. And that's not to put pressure. This is year one. I do think there's still a world where the weapons he has to work with should just go up and up and up. And I think you'll see A&M attack certain positions in the portal this offseason and through recruiting. And you're going to look up next year and the year after, and we're going to talk about it, an ascending talent level across the board on offense. But when I talk about weapons, right, and if it ends up being Bussy seeing more time over there, if it ends up where you get Jabri Barber, who is a big loss in the spring, if you end up getting him back, he's not going to be back for Notre Dame, but I mean, if you end up getting him back fairly early in the season, like all of a sudden, those are two potential weapons that couple weeks ago we weren't thinking about. And they're very those quick, explosive guys. Down the road, I love Ashton Bethel-Roman. He's a different level of speed and quickness. Isaiah Williams is a guy, too, that stood out to me a couple times this past week. I'm like, wait, oh, yeah. You know, he kind of pops. But they're true freshmen. They've got to learn things. It wouldn't shock me if you saw some of Williams early. Cyrus Allen's made some plays this week. And he's made plays all along, but I've started to notice him more this week. Micah Tease, everybody saw that great catch he made on the indoor. It's not been the only play. I still think it's your usual suspects there that we went into camp. Noah's had a great camp. I think with Noah, the key is going to be, we talk about the health. It's just confidence.
Yeah.
If he can get going. Ja'Day Walker this week had a terrific touchdown catch. He's rock solid. He finished the year with, 3 straight 100-yard games. Do I think he's one of these Bama, Clemson, LSU guys we've seen in the past? No, but that doesn't mean that any given week. That's what I think they have is any given week. Ja'Day, Noah, or Moose could have a big one. And I think Cyrus Allen's one of these guys that we haven't talked about enough. He can play.
And you expect
he's proven that
Jabri
in camp
to be one of these big games.
I expect Jabri to make it back per what Elko's been saying and what I've been hearing. And, no, I think he was positioned to maybe be – that guy might have been my pick to catch the most passes this year if he entered the season healthy and play. Like, I think he's a real weapon and kind of gives them a little bit of juice that maybe the unit doesn't have in terms of that change of direction and quickness and just create a real problem based on how Klein could match him up. So I think that's your general receiving core. Bostic, who they brought in from Iowa, is a big possession type guy. I think right now, though, as we're a couple weeks in, I still think that kind of core nucleus is what we thought it would be, with some real encouraging signs from the younger guys. And somebody was, people are asking me, well, I heard they were, it's been going around like, oh, I heard they drop. And we're out there. They don't catch every single pass. It's fine. You're not out there for all of practice generally. When you are, you see those days where they do catch the ball really well. And I think that's an example of what we're talking about, though, is just they just got to get that consistency going. And we've seen it. Like when Noah gets going, he's up here. Ja'Day dropped passes last year.
Early on.
Kind of fell out of favor, I feel like, with Jimbo and Damian Craig. And then he worked his way back, and he was kind of snagging everything those last few weeks. Same thing with Moose. I don't think we see Moose drop many, but Moose's production has gone like this throughout his career. Those guys, nothing's changed with me after they've got to go out there and prove that in the way of consistency. You know what I mean?
What's so fun about fun? It can take any form. Be a sacred ritual.
Who wants chicken?
Or a random whim. For us, fun is everything. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there.
So I know you have something to get to.
All right, we'll keep going.
All right. Well,
10 minutes.
Because what I noticed at the press conference from Connor was that swag I hear about walking to the podium. There was something about his demeanor that I feel is also translating, as it always has, on the field.
He's the guy. And I think he has changed in terms of just kind of embracing that role of a guy, that quarterback that's ready to kind of take the next step. That's been not talked about enough. Although I do see people around the SEC, kind of since media days, you do see his name mentioned more and more. You do see stuff going around on Twitter more and more about him. And I think it's reaching the level now where it should have been all along, which is don't forget about this guy. I don't think Connor should be thrust up into the conversation of SEC's best quarterbacks yet, because those guys have just played a ton more, and he's an 8-game starter. I think he will be there, though. And I've seen nothing in fall camp that makes me think otherwise. He looks, I kept saying, be patient. Don't panic about what he looks like in the spring, moving around on that foot. The best thing they ever did was practice him in the spring. And the best thing Connor did was practice in the spring. He learned the offense. He worked out the weird movements that come with actually playing football and seeing rushers. And he worked through Klein's offense by taking snaps and playing in it versus a film room. And I think he showed to the team and himself and the coaches like, hey, this is a big deal to me. And I am a leader, even though I'm not rah-rah. Like, I'm going to be out here playing hurt. When your quarterback's out there playing, he wasn't hurt, but he wasn't 100%. I'm out there not at 100%. I'm going to go out there every day and practice. I thought that was important for him too, and now you're seeing it in camp. And here's what Connor's done, in my opinion, throughout camp here, and especially in the last, 10 days or so, right here. I think Connor's progression has been probably exactly what Elko and Klein would like to see. And I think it's ramping up exactly how you want it to heading into fall camp. Heading into Notre Dame. And then the other part of the season, the other part of the position, I think the good news is those two, Reed and Henderson, are really battling it out. I said the other day, you guys were asking, they asked me on the Ask Liucci, how do you think it'll go? I don't think that's settled yet. It might be, I don't know how they're going to handle that about number 2 or number 3 by the end of the week. Maybe next week, Notre Dame, you start getting one of those guys.
Does it feel like it's trending one direction yet?
No, not if you're just following not if you're following the reps. It doesn't. And again, it's one of those deals where some days I go, man, Marcel Reed looks like he's going to be that guy. And then it's right when you start thinking that Jalen will have a good day. Mm-hmm. When it comes to Reed, I just think he's only scratching the surface. I think he's ready to throw in there yet? No, but he's only scratching the surface. And he's a guy that I just think, both of them though, man, when they go in games, it's that running dynamic that settles it down for them and really puts the pressure on the defense. They're a really nice situation at quarterback when you go Connor, Reed, and Henderson. And then Miles O'Neal. You watch him throw the football.
Yeah.
I said this the other day. You had Starkle, you had Calzada. They're same deal, just incredible arms from day one. Oh, wow, look at that. You got to be able to put it together, and Calzada has. Starkle did to varying degrees at 3 different stops. But we're talking about, can this guy be a star in maroon and white, a big-time SEC quarterback? Time will tell. But the arm is different to me when I watch him. It's because he's got the quick release and he just throws, to me, a much more accurate and catchable ball at that age than those two guys did. Starkle a lot of times was sailing them early. Calzada was wobbling, and and again, those guys both developed and had not only some great games at A&M, but particularly elsewhere. But I think if you're just saying at the same age, I'm looking at that guy and I'm saying he's further along, or he just looks better throwing the football, and that's saying something, because before either of those two guys played, I was sitting there and so was everyone else going, damn.
Right.
And so that's not an insult. That's a compliment of Miles O'Neal. And I think he's a guy that'll be really interesting to watch, next year and beyond.
All right. We'll have you on the show tomorrow.
What haven't we talked about?
We haven't talked about running back. We haven't talked special teams.
I think special teams are going to be in good hands. And I love the fact that they're actually being coached by an actual coach now in Doherty, who was a real important piece. Didn't get much fanfare. Tight end, special teams coming over, but an important piece for Elko to bring. I think Elko felt like it was a vital component to bring over. I like the options in the return game. Mm-hmm. When you look at guys like Moose, Cyrus, Bussy, he's so explosive. I don't know where he fits in with that, but I would. You're gonna see.
You'll see him.
He's got like. I watch him and it's like, I'm trying to think of. I need to think of an apt comparison. And in the return game, I'm just trying to think of
A-Chain or
I not with that speed, but he's very fast. But no, I need to think on that a little more. But he's, almost like something between A-Chain and Ananias. You know, he's faster than Ananias, but he's very difficult to tackle like Ananias. But he hits that accelerator more like A-Chain. I'm trying to think of who would be a good. Might need to go off of A&M players to try to think of who
Ananias A-Chain. That's the guy.
Who he reminds me of. But Randy Bonds had a great camp. And Tyler White, you see him sometimes hit some that we just haven't seen around here in a few. You know, it's not been forever. And Constantino came on really strong
years ago,
early.
yeah.
But, man, you watch when Tyler White hits him, you know, and gets into him. I think he could be a weapon as he develops consistency. That'll be the test early on is like, can you go out there and do it every time? But man, the leg is definitely there, and he looks a lot better doing it than he did a season ago. That's your special teams. Tight end, I think Watson's going to be a tough cover for opposing teams. I think Theo, I talked about him the other day, when you hear Colin Klein say he's really been impressive at the point of attack, that matters to me for a tight end that's 270. Sure, catch a pass up the seam, you're going to be a problem to tackle when you get ahead of steam. We're going to see some of that, but I'm talking more about blocking. And when I hear Klein use the words point of attack with a 270-pound tight end, that for the last couple of years, first couple of years, I don't think knew a lot of times who to block.
Right.
Coming from Sweden, and they moved Max Wright over, and you could talk to Max when he's on. How long did it take Max Wright? He was always willing to block, but a lot of times you don't know exactly, and you're not the most confident firing off the ball, and you're going to get whipped. You're going to get hit hard. You're going to get smacked around, and then you kind of get in your own head. And I think Theo was living in that world some last year. And so when I hear Colin Klein say that in the presser last week, I go, okay, that's what I like to hear, because the dude looks like he can displace some bodies. Donovan is coming. I think Donovan is one of those guys that you kind of follow throughout the season and watch him get more and more comfortable back on that knee. He's added weight. He looks a lot bigger, like he's been doing work in the weight room, but that's kind of two things he's having to adjust to at once. So he could be a nice little season goes on, and all of a sudden you go, okay, he's back.
He's back, yeah.
But he's back. He's practicing every day, and he's a part of it right now. And again, it's been exactly 12 months, maybe even to the day that he tore that ACL. So don't forget about him and the potential for a greater impact as the season goes on. And then I think we talked a lot about the D-line, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I think it's I don't think there's many secrets there on that D-line that we don't know about. I still think, I heard them talking about it in the presser this week, Cassius Howell. I think he's a guy that doesn't get enough run, and every scout that's come through has come out. They know about Scorton and Shamar, but the guy they come away going, okay,
who's this
Shamar
guy?
Stewart. Not who's this guy, but they're like, okay, Shamar Stewart, his high-end potential, meaning even at the end of this year, is like shoot up the draft boards, like way up.
First, second
round type of guy. He's got to do what he did last year, which is build up throughout the season and keep that going. But I don't think we talk about what if he's like an impact SEC defensive end. What does that do for the whole unit? And then I just like the pass rushing potential of Howell, Silla, Kennedy, and these guys that can be these edgy, rangy guys that we don't talk about enough. And then on that D line, man, again, there hasn't been much surprise. The battle that's fun to watch is Regis and Hicks, the veteran that's played a lot. That I said coming out of spring, no one was talking about. He had a really good spring. And then again in Hicks, a 5-star who shows it out there at camp, like he's living up to it. It's not like again, like those two are going to play a ton. Just whoever takes the first snap, I'll be interested to see. I think the reps will be both those guys are going to play a ton, and they have to. You have to have rotation on the inside of that D line, and when other teams are going to be trotting out guys where it's a big fall off, you're either going to trot out Albert Regis, who's a 4th-year man-child in there at about 315 pounds, or you're going to try out DJ Hicks, who's going to be, this terror inside that's going to be causing all kinds of problems as a 5-star gifted athlete in there. So, I mean, either way, there's going to be no fall off when they rotate guys in there. And then if Shamar has to come out for breather, here's Rodis Johnson, who started 25 games at Wisconsin. I mean, it's crazy what they're able to do on the inside. And it's the only other thing we talk about is running back, where Le'Veon, I think, is going to be poised for a breakout season. I think he's been really impressive. Like, I think they'll split carries enough, but I mean, he has like high-end SEC potential. And then Amari, he's one of those don't talk about him enough guys. He's had a good camp. And lately I've noticed E.J. Smith. E.J. Smith's got some juice. And he's got that little thing where he'll plant that foot and make a quick cut and get upfield. And when he does, it kind of catches your attention. He's got a little burst through traffic. Mm-hmm. And then we know what he can, well, if you followed him as a recruit and you saw it, and you watch him at practice, you know what he can do as a receiving weapon. Losing Rubin was a big blow, but it was a blow at a position where they fortunately could withstand it. But obviously, you'd love to have him because we'd spend a lot of time talking about him right now in this. So, what do we got? We've hit everything. I think fall camp. It's been a really good fall camp. I know if you listen to that, you've got us at 12-0. That's not what we're talking about. That was just kind of a rundown of how things might look, early in the season in terms of who's. I think they're going to play. I'm exaggerating when I say everyone, but I think you're going to see them use that depth to their advantage in September.
Right.
When you're playing Notre Dame and it's 95 degrees for 4 hours, and you're going to Florida where it's going to be similar. It's going to be during the day. I think you're going to see Mike Elko and his staff use that depth to their advantage, and that was kind of what we just went through, was the depth of this football team. Even at the positions that we're kind of going, okay, let's keep an eye on them and see how big a jump they make. O-line, secondary, even linebacker where you lost Edgerrin Cooper. But that depth is there. I think when we think depth, all we talk about is the D-line, but it's not true. I think they've got it everywhere. I still have – we're still at a believe it when we see it in terms of the O-line and receiver. So that kind of makes for offense in general. But I also think when I've watched out there and when we're out there watching.
You're seeing some of it.
Well, but what I'm going to say is when Connor Wigman has time, he can make do without time. We saw it against Miami. Yeah. But when he has time, like I'm just telling you, that football is delivered. So, okay, maybe this receiver doesn't get a bunch of separation. Well, that's okay with Connor Wigman because he's going to get rid of the ball quickly, and if it needs to be put here, it's put here. If it needs to be put over here down the field, it's put over here. Yeah. You got a guy on his shoulder, and he's thrown to this sideline. If you're coming across the middle and you're in coverage, he'll throw it low where only you can catch it. There's a guy coming here. There's a guy on his back. He's going to throw it low where that receiver knows he's just got to slide and catch it and move the chains. You watch him do that, and that's why you're seeing scouts and everybody talk. The accuracy in all throws, not everybody can do that. And I've talked to guys about some of these other quarterbacks in the SEC, some bigger names, and some of the questions for the scouts are, where's the accuracy?
Right.
He's kind of spraying it all over. I've heard that some about Nussmeier. Great arm. Kind of all over the place with it. We've seen that. Nobody wants to hear this. We've seen that with Quinn Ewers. Any honest Longhorn fan would tell you he's going to have to take that next step. I think he's a really good quarterback. I'm not saying I do think he is. I don't think, I know. We've watched him. But if any Longhorn would tell you that he doesn't need to work on accuracy to take that next step and become more accurate to all parts of the field, you'd be lying to yourself. And I think that's Connor's, one of his real strengths, is just a feel for pressure.
Right.
Knowing when, but man, when he has time, he can sling it and really place it. So to me, O-line, receiver, secondary, these are the positions that, last year I don't think were, they held A&M back. This year I'm really encouraged about what I've seen in the secondary. I really like the depth and the players they'll be trotting out on the O-line. You'd love to have had entered the season with some franchise tackle. But and then at receiver, this is going to be hey, you got about 5 or 6 dudes, and let's see who's out there making plays, and let's ride those guys. If I'm making my pick, I'm still looking at Noah Thomas. I'm still looking at him as a guy that, hey, he could be a big weapon this year. They're going to use him. He's talked about it. He's going to be a weapon in as many different ways as they can find it. So there you go. It's Notre Dame. We'll break it down. I think that's a very evenly matched football game. I don't care what the rankings say. They're coming to Kyle Field, and I think Texas A&M would match up very well with them on a neutral site. And I'm sure Notre Dame feels the same, but I think that's going to be a D-line dominated game, and we'll talk about it more. We'll get some predictions and stuff. But I feel like Texas A&M is trending the right way as this opener approaches. And look, if you'd have asked me 2 weeks ago and today, or 15 practices or whatever, what's your confidence, where you at on your confidence meter, I would say I'm not sitting here saying this team's going to push their way into the college football playoff. I just don't think you can look at that and tell enough. You're going to be able to – we have that conversation after they played Notre Dame in Florida, in my opinion. That's when you have that conversation. If you beat those two teams, or even if you win one and lost a heartbreak or whatever, but you have that conversation after those two games, where are they at for the SEC? What kind of noise can they make? But if I'm just watching this football team if I went and watched the first time I went out to practice and the last couple of times, and it is a noticeable trajectory like that, I don't know how Mike Elko would feel about that. That's my takeaway. Yeah. As I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, they're getting noticeably better as a team. And instead of guys falling off and going, he can't play, you see guys like I mentioned, like a TJ Shanahan or a Terry Bussey or, I'm trying to think of who else I've mentioned in that regard. Rylan Kennedy. You see these guys instead thrusting themselves into the competition versus guys bowing out. And I actually am 100% convinced that's a good thing.
Billy, thank you, sir.
All right.
We'll do more on radio tomorrow. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Fun, memories, friendship. We're here for all of it. Here for the big moments and the small ones too. We're here for unforgettable triumph, momentary misfortune, and the impromptu throwdown. We're out here each day, chasing something great. Call it adventure, call it play, we call it fun. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there.